The Guardians of the Galaxy are awesome. Everyone loves this ragtag team of misfits, and with the latest Guardians of the Galaxy movie coming out, there's never been a better time to hop into the comics of these classic characters. And luckily, these characters haven't really been around that long, only really gaining popularity in comics in the last 20 years. But just like everyone else, I was introduced to these characters through the movies, so I wanted to really understand these characters more and dive into their comics before the new movie came out. And I read a ton of classic Guardians of the Galaxy comics and nearly overdosed on this much Guardians content, so after struggling my own way through all of these Guardians of the Galaxy comics, I finally was able to put together a list of the best and most easy Guardians of the Galaxy comics to hop into. And so this is my guide on how to get into Guardians of the Galaxy comics as easily as possible. Also, just a reminder before we get started, I'm not going to recommend the original Guardians of the Galaxy comics. You don't need to start from the beginning because authors who write the comic books usually just do their own thing in their own runs. Now, a comic book run is a story arc that's all under one writer and it's all about a certain group of characters. It can be an issue, it can be 4 issues, it can be 160 issues. It really depends, but all runs are great jumping on points. So whichever series here seems the most interesting to you, go read that because they're all great places to get started. Now, the first comic book series I'm going to recommend is the Guardians of the Galaxy series by Dan Abnett and Andy Landy. This is an absolutely incredible Guardians of the Galaxy run that everyone absolutely adores from what I've seen online, and when I read it, I was absolutely floored with how much I loved it. Now, this entire Guardians team basically came out of the Annihilation event that came out in 2006. It was a big event for space where it basically set up our main characters that we know. Star-Lord, Groot, Drax, this is where they all came from, and this book is really what set the Guardians on the map for who they are today. It is absolutely great. It's a huge sprawling adventure of the Guardians coming together for the first time, and it's absolutely incredible just how interesting and complex it is. It's 2 volumes. It's this, volume 1 and volume 2. It's 25 issues, so it's not too long of a read. I was able to read these both in about 2 days, and they're absolutely incredible. This one building off the team. This time we actually get to see a lot more than we get to see in the movies. You get to see Adam Warlock in the team as well. It is the same team of Star-Lord, Groot, Gamora, Drax, Rocket, but you have Adam Warlock and Vera, who's a new character as well. You also get to see Mantis, Cosmo the dog from the new movie. He's in this originally. And you also get to see other characters like Bug. A huge character also is Major Victory. He's a really interesting character that you get to see throughout. And this is just such an interesting and expansive story. The art is absolutely incredible in this story, and it's so good throughout both volumes. Volume 2 is a much more larger, more epic story. It's absolutely incredible, tackling this huge war that ends up sending the Guardians sprawling through time and the universe. Black Bolt's in it, there's Cosmo, and it ends up being this absolutely huge event that even goes further into more events that end up going further. These honestly are great to contain volumes, and if you really want to capture the heart of the Guardians, while not being exactly the same as the movies, go into these. This is the best Guardians comics that I've read. They are absolutely incredible, and I recommend them wholeheartedly. But this is not a complete series since it is a Marvel story. It's going to really lead into other things. So you can really pick up the end of this story with what I've heard is great with the Thanos Imperative. I have not read this yet, but people said this is also a pretty good way just to end the whole thing if you really want a nice, bow on everything. But honestly, I think if you really just want Guardian stuff, you can read these 2 and you'll have a great time. So the next run that we have is the Jerry Dugan run. This basically solidified the Guardians of the Galaxy team as we know it. So it's we got Drax, Star-Lord, Gamora, Rocket, Groot. This has incredible art, and it's just such a fun storyline for the Guardians this time around. Really fun. The first volume is the strongest, but it does end pretty well with volume 3 here. The worst part about this series is that it doesn't actually end by itself. So just like most comics, it ends up just keep going and doesn't fully wrap itself up. This time it does spin off into this series called Infinity Wars, which was this huge event that Jerry Dugan, the writer of these 3 trades, did. But I did not read that. I've heard it's actually not that great. So actually I would recommend that you just skip that because you can just read these and they will actually work pretty well on their own. They don't wrap up perfectly in volume 3, but this is just such a fun story to hop in for Guardians. If you just want some good old MCU Guardians, like what you see in volume 1 and 2, this is probably the closest I've read where they really feel like just straight adaptations of those. These are really fun books, and even if they don't end perfectly with a great wrap up in volume 3, this is just still such a fun run on Guardians of the Galaxy. Highly recommend for the Jerry Dugan all new Guardians of the Galaxy run. Now, there were some runs that I did read as well that I just didn't end up loving as much when I was doing all this research. I read the spinoff of Star-Lord, and I read a little bit of these 2 Guardians series, but just didn't end up clicking with them fully. But the one last series that I do want to recommend that isn't a mainline Guardians book that I absolutely adored was Scotty Young's take on Rocket Raccoon in his series that he did. It is absolutely adorable. It is such a good little series on Rocket Raccoon and just his little adventures that he has. It's so well done. It's just these fun little scripts of him and Groot just running around, having adventures, and the art is just amazing in this book. It is so delightful to just read, and just it is so easy to run through. It is just a blast the entire time through. Scotty Young's art here really is the standout, and also Rocket is just written so well here that I just had a blast going through these 2 volumes. I absolutely loved it, and I know it sounds like a pretty big differential from the first 2 books that I recommend. These 2 series right here end up being these pretty darker stories, this being a huge cosmic event, this being one of this entire group coming together in a giant war fighting. But I think these are great Guardian stories, but man, this is just so fun and captures the heart of Guardians so well, and just Rocket Raccoon, and it is just such a blast. So Rocket Raccoon ends up being the 3rd series that I would recommend for you guys to check out if you want to read some Guardians of the Galaxy. And those were my favorite Guardians of the Galaxy comics that I read. I know it's not a lot, but I did read a lot of books for this video. Just ended up being those were the ones I actually loved and really wanted to share with you guys, because the other ones were just fine to decent. I don't think they're worth your time as much. But still, if you have a real Guardians fix, I think these 3 series are absolutely amazing. You should go check them out. Make sure to check out these books out, and also maybe check out other works these authors did as well if you really click with a certain author. If you want to see more of my comic book videos, I did a video a while back on reviewing all of the greatest Batman books, so check that video out, and also check out my video on how to get into Dungeons and Dragons. If you're into nerdy stuff like comic books, you might be into that too. Anyway, stay tuned. I have more Guardians of the Galaxy videos on the way soon, so when those come out, I'll see you then. Bye.